Billionaire kicked out pregnant maid just to please his wife. Then this happened. On a stormy night in September. September 14th. 9:47 at night. In a mansion in Buckhead, Atlanta. A young woman, pregnant, barefoot, is being dragged across the wet pavement by two security guards. Her screams pierce through the thunder. She's clutching her stomach, her face twisted in agony. But right there, right then, she kept begging for mercy. The two security guards are dragging her away from the property. Her bare feet scraping against the concrete. Her hands clutching her stomach. She's begging them to stop. Begging them to have mercy. They don't even look at her. They have their orders. Inside that mansion, standing at the window on the second floor, is the man who gave those orders. Byron Mitchell. Billionaire. Real estate mogul. His face is stone. No emotion. No compassion. Just cold calculation. His wife stands beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. She whispers something in his ear. He nods. The guards drop the woman just beyond the property line and walk back through the gates. The gates close. The lights in the mansion go dark. That woman's name was Simone. Alone with no help. Just her, the storm, and a God she wasn't sure was listening anymore. 8 years later, Simone walked back through those gates. Not as a maid. Not as a victim. But as the woman who would bring Byron Mitchell's empire to its knees with nothing but the truth he tried to bury. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Why would a billionaire throw a pregnant woman out into a storm? What was he hiding? What was he so afraid of that he'd let her suffer? And his wife, the elegant, educated woman who stood beside him that night, why did she not only allow it but demand it? You're going to see how one moment of wickedness created a chain reaction that destroyed lives, ended careers, and exposed secrets that powerful people spent millions trying to bury. You're going to meet Simone, a woman who survived the unthinkable. You're going to meet her daughter, Zara, whose eyes told a story her mother never had to speak. And you're going to witness the moment when everything Byron Mitchell built came crashing down because he underestimated the woman he threw away. Stay with me, because what comes next will leave you breathless. 3 years before that night, Simone was 19 years old, fresh out of community college, and desperate for a job that paid more than $8 an hour. She'd grown up in East Point with her grandmother, Mama Louise, after her own mother disappeared when Simone was 7. Mama Louise cleaned houses for a living, worked 6 days a week, and still barely kept the lights on. But she raised Simone with love, with faith, and with the belief that if you worked hard and stayed honest, God would make a way. Simone applied for a housekeeping position at the Mitchell estate through an agency. She didn't know who Byron Mitchell was. Didn't know his name was on buildings downtown. Didn't know his company owned half the commercial real estate in Atlanta. She just knew the job paid $15 an hour plus room. That was more money than she'd ever made. She got the job. Moved into the staff quarters, a small but clean room above the garage. Started work the next Monday. The Mitchell mansion was like something out of a magazine. 10,000 square feet. Indoor pool. Wine cellar. A kitchen bigger than most apartments. Byron and his wife, Victoria, lived there with a staff of 8. A head housekeeper, a chef, 2 groundskeepers, a driver, a personal assistant, and now Simone. Byron was 41, tall, fit, always in expensive suits even on weekends. He had that kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Victoria was 39, beautiful in that polished way that takes money to maintain. Personal trainer. Dermatologist. Designer everything. She smiled for photos, but her eyes were always calculating, always watching. Simone kept to herself. She cleaned the room she was assigned, ate meals in the staff kitchen, sent most of her paycheck to Mama Louise who needed heart medication she couldn't afford. Simone was quiet, respectful, invisible. That's how she survived. She'd learned early that when you're the help, you don't make waves. You don't ask questions. You definitely don't get noticed. But Byron noticed her anyway. Not at first. At first she was just another staff member, someone who faded into the background. But after about 6 months he started paying attention. She was in the library dusting shelves one afternoon when he came in. Asked her opinion on a book. She answered honestly, told him she loved reading but hadn't had time lately. He seemed surprised. Surprised that the maid had thoughts, had interests, had a brain. He started talking to her when Victoria wasn't around. Nothing inappropriate. Just small talk. But Simone felt uncomfortable. She knew better than to be friendly with the man who signed her checks. Byron and Victoria's marriage was falling apart. Everyone on staff knew it. They slept in separate bedrooms. Barely spoke to each other. Fought in whispers behind closed doors. The core issue was children. They'd been trying for 5 years. Spent hundreds of thousands on fertility treatments. Nothing worked. Victoria blamed Byron. Byron blamed Victoria. The truth was probably that neither of them was the problem. But blame is easier than acceptance. And blame can poison everything. Byron started drinking more. Coming home late. Missing meetings. His business partners started worrying. His board started asking questions. And Victoria started planning. She wasn't going to let this marriage destroy her reputation. She came from money, old Atlanta money, the kind that still mattered in certain circles. A divorce would be embarrassing but manageable. But a public divorce, one where details came out, where people learned about the fertility issues and the fights and the drinking, that would be humiliating. So Victoria waited. Prepared for the moment she'd need to protect herself. Then came February 9th. A date Simone would remember for the rest of her life. Victoria had flown to Miami for a week, some spa retreat with her friends. Byron stayed home. He'd been drinking that afternoon, had a fight with his business partner over the phone, was in a dark mood. Most of the staff had the evening off. Simone was in the kitchen, finishing up the dinner dishes around 9. Byron came in. She greeted him politely, tried to leave. He asked her to stay to make him coffee. She did. He started talking. Rambling really. About his marriage, his failures, his frustrations. Simone listened because what else could she do? She was 19. He was her boss. She didn't know how to politely escape. He moved closer. She stepped back. He asked her if she thought he was a good man. She didn't know how to answer. He reached out, touched her arm. She pulled away, said she needed to go. He blocked the door. And what happened next, what he did to her on that cold kitchen floor while she cried and begged him to stop, that wasn't something she could ever forget. When it was over, he stood up, straightened his clothes, and walked out without a word. Left her there shaking, bleeding, broken. Simone didn't tell anyone. Who would believe her? He was Byron Mitchell. She was nobody. She cleaned herself up, went to her room, and cried until she couldn't breathe. She thought about quitting, but she needed the money. Mama Louise's medication cost $300 a month. So Simone stayed. Avoided Byron. Kept her head down. Prayed the memory would fade. But 2 months later, she missed her period. Then another. She took a test in the staff bathroom. Positive. She was pregnant with Byron Mitchell's child. Simone sat on her bed staring at that positive test for 2 hours. She thought about her options. Abortion was the obvious one, but she'd been raised in the church and the guilt already felt unbearable. Keeping it meant keeping the job, hiding the pregnancy, figuring out a plan before anyone noticed. She decided on the latter. She'd work as long as she could, save every penny, then quietly leave and handle it on her own. But she underestimated Victoria. Victoria had instincts like a bloodhound. She noticed everything. The way Simone started wearing baggier clothes. The way she'd disappear to the bathroom and come back pale. The prenatal vitamins Simone accidentally left on the counter in the staff bathroom. Victoria didn't confront Simone. She did something smarter. She hired a private investigator. Gave him 3 weeks. He came back with all she needed. The week Victoria was in Miami. Byron home alone. Simone on duty. Security footage showing Byron entering the kitchen. Simone leaving an hour later looking shaken. Medical records showing Simone was approximately 3 months pregnant. The math was simple. Victoria confronted Byron in his study on a Tuesday morning. Didn't yell, didn't cry. She laid out the evidence like a prosecutor. Byron tried to deny it, said Simone was lying, said she'd seduced him. Victoria didn't care about his excuses. She cared about protecting herself. She told him, if this gets out, if anyone finds out you got the maid pregnant, your company is finished. The board will force you out. Your reputation will be destroyed. Everything your father built, everything you've spent your life maintaining, gone. So you have 2 choices. Handle this quietly or lose everything. Byron asked what she meant by handle it. Victoria said, get rid of her. Pay her off. Make her disappear. I don't care how. Just make sure this never becomes public. Byron sat there staring at his hands. He thought about the headlines, the lawsuits, the shareholders, the family legacy, and he made his choice. He called his head of security, a man named Marcus, who'd been with the family for 15 years. Told him he needed a problem solved discreetly. Marcus understood. He'd solved problems before. The next day at night when no one will notice, Simone was called into Byron's office. She'd been dreading this moment. But she thought maybe he'd do the right thing. Maybe he'd help her, set her up somewhere, make sure the baby had what it needed. Instead, Byron handed her an envelope. Inside was $3,000 cash and a termination letter. She was fired effective immediately. No reason given. No severance beyond the cash. She tried to speak but Byron wouldn't look at her. He said, "You need to leave today. Marcus will escort you." Simone felt her world collapse. She begged. Said she needed this job, needed the health insurance, needed help. Byron pressed a button on his desk. Marcus appeared with another security guard. Took her arm. Let her out. She cried and begged but they had their order. Victoria watched from the upstairs window as Marcus walked Simone to the gates and made sure she left the property. Simone stood outside those gates with a garbage bag full of her belongings, $3,000 that would barely cover 2 months of rent, and a baby growing inside her. She had no family except Mama Louise who was barely surviving herself. No friends in Atlanta who could help. No backup plan. She ended up at a women's shelter in southwest Atlanta, sleeping on a cot with other women, trying to figure out how to survive until the baby came. But Victoria wasn't done. She couldn't risk Simone showing up somewhere telling someone making noise. So Victoria used her connections. She called the free clinic where Simone had registered for prenatal care and had her file flagged, claiming Simone had a history of making false accusations. She contacted the shelter and anonymously reported that Simone was mentally unstable. She even sent Marcus to follow Simone for a month, documenting where she went, who she talked to, building a file in case she ever needed to discredit her. Victoria was thorough. She always had been. Simone felt the walls closing in. Every job application got rejected. Every clinic turned her away. She started believing maybe she was cursed. She'd lie awake at night in that shelter with her hand on her belly and whisper prayers. She didn't ask for revenge. She didn't even ask for justice. She just asked God to let her baby live. That was all that mattered. Just let the baby live. Months passed. Simone got by on odd jobs, cleaning houses under the table, babysitting, anything that paid cash. She saved every dollar she could. By the time she was 8 months pregnant, she had $900 saved. Not enough for a hospital delivery. Not enough for anything really. But it was something. She'd heard there were midwives who worked cheap, who helped women who couldn't afford hospitals. She started asking around. Then came the night everything exploded. It was September 13th. Simone was working a catering gig off the books at some fancy event in Buckhead. She needed the money. $100 for 6 hours of serving drinks. She took the job even though she was exhausted, even though her back hurt, even though she probably shouldn't have been on her feet that long. The event was at a hotel but the catering company had a warehouse nearby where they prepped the food. Simone was helping load supplies into a van when she saw it. Parked across the street. Byron's car. That black Mercedes she'd seen 1,000 times. She froze. He was here. Somewhere nearby. Part of her wanted to run. But another part, a desperate part, thought maybe this was a sign. Maybe she could approach him. Not to threaten him or demand anything. Just to ask for help with the hospital bill. Just a few $1,000s so she wouldn't have to deliver her baby in some unsafe situation. It was foolish. She knew it was foolish. But desperation makes you do things you wouldn't normally do. She waited until the event ended, until Byron came out of the hotel. She approached him in the parking garage. He saw her and his face went white. She tried to speak calmly, tried to explain she just needed help with medical costs. He told her to stay away from him, said if she ever contacted him again he'd have her arrested for harassment. She started crying, begging. He pulled out his phone. She grabbed his arm. He moved away. She fell. Hit the concrete hard. Pain shot through her abdomen. Sharp, immediate, terrifying. Her water broke right there in that parking garage. She looked up at Byron and said, "The baby's coming. Please, help me." Byron stood there for 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. Then he got in his car and drove away. Left her there on the ground. A parking attendant found her 10 minutes later and called 911. But by the time the ambulance arrived, Simone knew something was wrong. The contractions were too fast, too intense. The paramedics said the baby was in distress. They rushed her to Grady Hospital. Emergency C-section. Touch and go for both mother and baby. But somehow, by grace or miracle or pure stubborn will to survive, both made it. Simone woke up in recovery to see her daughter for the first time. 6 pounds 2 ounces. Perfect. Beautiful. Alive. She named her Zara. It means blooming flower. It means something beautiful that grows despite everything. Before we continue, let me ask you something. Have you ever been abandoned by someone who had the power to help you? Have you ever felt completely alone in your darkest moment? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story is hitting you hard, hit that like button and let us know you're still here. The hospital social worker came to see Simone the day after Zara was born. Asked about family, support, housing. Simone had none of those things. The social worker gently suggested foster care, just temporarily until Simone got stable. Simone refused. She'd rather live on the street than lose her baby. The social worker sighed, made some calls, and found Simone a spot in a transitional housing program for new mothers. It was in Vine City in a building that had seen better days, but it was a roof. Simone could stay for 6 months while she got on her feet. Those 6 months were the hardest of her life. Zara cried constantly, barely slept. Simone was recovering from the C-section, exhausted, overwhelmed. She had no idea how to be a mother. No idea how to afford diapers, formula, doctor visits. She applied for assistance, got food stamps and Medicaid, but it wasn't enough. She took a job cleaning offices at night, brought Zara with her, let her sleep in a carrier while Simone vacuumed and scrubbed toilets. It was humiliating. It was exhausting. But it was survival. Mama Louise came to visit once, took the bus across town with her oxygen tank. She was so sick by then, her heart barely working, but she held Zara and cried happy tears. She told Simone, "Baby, you're stronger than you know. God's got plans for you. Don't you give up." Mama Louise died 3 weeks later. Heart attack. Simone couldn't afford a funeral. They cremated her and Simone kept the ashes in a box under her bed. She talked to that box sometimes when things got really hard. Ask Mama Louise for strength. Ask her if she was doing okay. Ask her if she'd be proud. Meanwhile, Byron Mitchell's life continued without consequence. His business thrived. He closed a $200 million deal. Got profiled in Forbes. Bought a vacation house in Hilton Head. He and Victoria divorced quietly, no scandal, split everything 50-50. Victoria remarried within a year, some banker from New York. Byron stayed single, focused on work. He didn't think about Simone. Didn't think about the baby. He'd locked it away, convinced himself it never happened. But guilt has a way of finding you. Byron started having nightmares. Dreams where he'd hear a baby crying, where he'd see Simone's face, where he'd wake up in a cold sweat feeling like he couldn't breathe. He went to therapy, didn't tell the therapist the real reason he was there, just said he had generalized anxiety. The therapist prescribed medication. It didn't help. Byron started drinking more, sleeping less, avoiding mirrors. His friends noticed he'd changed. He was irritable, distant, paranoid. He stopped going to social events. Stopped dating. 5 years passed. Simone was 27. She'd worked her way up from cleaning offices to working as a medical assistant at a community health clinic. The pay was better. The hours were stable. She and Zara had moved into a small apartment in East Point, not far from where Simone grew up. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Zara was in kindergarten, bright and curious and full of life. She asked questions constantly. Wanted to know how everything worked. Teachers said she was gifted. Simone would watch her daughter sleep at night and feel overwhelmed with love and gratitude. They'd survived. They'd made it. But Zara looked just like Byron. Same eyes, same nose, same smile. Simone saw it every day. Sometimes it hurt. Sometimes it made her angry. But mostly it just reminded her that Zara was half of a story that wasn't finished. Because Byron Mitchell had never been held accountable. He'd abandoned her, left her to die, and faced zero consequences. That knowledge sat in Simone's chest like a stone. She tried to let it go. Tried to forgive. Tried to move on. But it wouldn't leave. One afternoon, Simone was at the clinic when a coworker showed her an article. Byron Mitchell was being honored at a charity gala. Businessman of the Year. Big smile in the photo, shaking hands with the mayor. Simone stared at that photo and felt something shift inside her. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Something clearer. She thought about all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep. All the times she'd skipped meals so Zara could eat. All the pain and fear and humiliation. And he was being celebrated. Honored. Rewarded. She made a decision that day. She was going to tell her story. Not for money. But because the truth mattered. Because other women needed to know they weren't alone. She started writing everything down. Every detail. Every date. Every moment. She contacted a lawyer who did pro bono work for assault survivors. The lawyer listened, believed her, and said, "We can file a civil suit. It's been years, but there's no statute of limitations on this in Georgia. We can make him answer for what he did." Simone thought about it for weeks. A lawsuit meant going public. It meant people knowing her story. It meant Zara eventually knowing the truth. But it also meant justice. It meant accountability. It meant Byron Mitchell couldn't hide anymore. She signed the papers. The lawsuit was filed. And then all hell broke loose. The lawsuit hit the news like a bomb. Billionaire accused of assault and abandonment. The story spread fast. News trucks parked outside Byron's office. Reporters called his cell phone. His lawyers issued a statement denying everything, calling Simone's claims fabricated, desperate, a money grab. They said she was unstable, had a history of making false accusations, couldn't be trusted. Victoria's fingerprints were all over that narrative. The file she'd built years ago was suddenly being weaponized. Byron's legal team was brutal. They dug into Simone's life. Found every mistake she'd ever made. Every late rent payment. Every job she'd lost. They painted her as a liar, a con artist, a woman who'd do anything for money. The media ran with it. Some outlets defended Simone. Others questioned her motives. Social media exploded. Half the comments called Byron a monster. The other half called Simone a gold digger. Simone tried to ignore it, but it was everywhere. She couldn't escape it. Then Byron's team made a mistake. They demanded DNA testing to prove Byron wasn't the father. They were so confident, so sure the test would exonerate him, they didn't think it through. Simone's lawyer agreed immediately. The test was scheduled. Zara's DNA was collected. Byron's was collected. They waited 2 weeks for results. When they came back, the room went silent. Byron Mitchell was Zara's biological father. No question. No doubt. No way to lie his way out of it. The second wave of news coverage was even bigger. DNA confirms Billionaire fathered child he abandoned. Byron's legal team scrambled. They shifted strategies, admitted paternity but claimed the encounter was consensual. Said Simone had initiated it, that Byron had ended things, that she'd gotten pregnant to trap him. It was disgusting. It was predictable. And it didn't work. Because Simone had evidence. She had the termination letter Byron gave her, dated months after the assault. She had testimony from other staff members who remembered seeing her distressed that night, who remembered hearing about her sudden firing. She had medical records from the emergency C-section showing injuries consistent with a fall, matching her story about Byron being responsible for her fall in the parking garage, when the cameras were checked. Piece by piece, her lawyer built a case that was impossible to deny. And the public turned. Byron's business partners started distancing themselves. Clients pulled contracts. His board called an emergency meeting. The pressure was immense. His lawyers recommended settlement. Offered Simone $5 million to go away quietly. She refused. She didn't want his money. She wanted him to admit what he did. She wanted an apology. She wanted the truth on record. The case went to trial. It lasted 3 weeks. Simone testified for 6 hours over 2 days. She told everything. Every painful, humiliating detail. Byron sat at the defense table looking smaller than she remembered. His lawyers did their best, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Found in Simone's favor on all counts. Awarded her $8 million in damages. But more than the money, the verdict was a statement. Byron Mitchell was guilty. The system had finally said it out loud. But a journalist who'd been covering the story did some digging and discovered something no one expected. Byron had done this before. Not exactly the same, but close enough. 10 years earlier, before he married Victoria, there'd been another young woman who worked for his company. She'd filed an internal complaint claiming Byron had assaulted her. The company had paid her off, made her sign an NDA, and buried the whole thing. The journalist found her, convinced her to talk. She confirmed everything. Suddenly it wasn't just Simone's story. It was a pattern. Other women started coming forward. Not all with assault claims, but with stories of harassment, intimidation, abuse of power. Byron Mitchell wasn't just a man who made one terrible mistake. He had done this again and again. He'd used his wealth and influence to silence his victims for years. The fallout was catastrophic. Criminal charges were filed. Byron was arrested. His company collapsed. His assets were frozen. Everything he'd built, everything he'd protected, gone. 2 years after the trial, Simone was 30. She'd used part of the settlement money to finish nursing school, to buy a house for herself and Zara, to start a non-profit helping women who'd survived assault. The organization was called Bloom, after Zara's name. They provided legal support, counseling, housing assistance. Simone poured everything into it. She spoke at events, shared her story, became a voice for survivors. And people listened. She was featured on national news. Invited to speak at conferences. Zara was 8, brilliant and kind and stronger than any kid should have to be. She knew her story now. Simone had told her in pieces as she got older, always age-appropriate, always honest. Zara asked questions and Simone answered them without shame. She taught Zara that what happened wasn't her fault, wasn't something to be embarrassed about, was just part of their story. And Zara understood. She'd tell people proudly, "My mom survived. She's the strongest person in the world." Byron was in prison, sentenced to 15 years on multiple charges. He tried to maintain his innocence at first, but eventually the weight of the evidence, the testimony from multiple women, the reality of what he'd done, it broke him. He wrote Simone a letter from prison. 6 pages. Apologizing, explaining, begging for forgiveness. Simone read it once and threw it away. She didn't need his apology. She'd already found peace. But then something unexpected happened. Byron's mother reached out. Her name was Diane. She was 74, sick with cancer, estranged from her son for years. She asked if she could meet Zara. Said she didn't want to die without knowing her only grandchild. Simone's first instinct was to refuse. But she prayed on it, talked to her therapist, talked to friends, and eventually decided to allow it. Not for Byron, not for Diane, but for Zara. Because Zara deserved to know where she came from, even the complicated parts. They met at a park in Piedmont. Diane showed up with a photo album, pictures of Byron as a child. She told Zara stories about her father before he became the man who hurt people. Showed her baby pictures, school photos, talked about his love of music and building things. It wasn't about excusing him. It was about giving Zara a fuller picture. Zara listened quietly, looked at the photos, and asked thoughtful questions. At the end, she told Diane, "Thank you for sharing. But my mom is my hero. She's the one who raised me. She's the one who matters." Diane cried, hugged Simone, said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what my son did. I don't expect you to forgive him. But thank you for letting me meet her. She's beautiful. You did good." They kept in touch after that. Not often, just occasional texts, pictures on holidays. Diane passed away 8 months later. Left Zara a trust fund, a small inheritance. Simone put it away for college. The years moved forward. Simone's nonprofit grew. They helped hundreds of women. Changed laws. Influenced policy. Simone became a prominent advocate, someone politicians and activists sought out. She testified before Congress. Advised on legislation. Became a consultant for companies trying to improve their harassment policies. She used her platform to push for change. And change happened. Because her story mattered. Because she refused to stay silent. Because she turned her trauma into transformation. Zara grew into a remarkable young woman. At 13, she wrote an essay about her mother for a school assignment. It went viral. People shared it millions of times. It was titled, "The Woman Who Wouldn't Break." In it, Zara wrote, "My mom was thrown away like trash. But she picked herself up, dusted herself off, and became a queen. She taught me that your beginning doesn't determine your ending. That pain can become power. That the people who try to bury you don't know you're a seed." Byron remained in prison. He stopped writing letters. Stopped trying to contact anyone from his old life. Word was he'd found religion inside, was leading Bible studies, trying to make amends in whatever way he could. Simone didn't care. She'd moved on. He was part of her past, not her present. And she'd built a present worth living. So let me ask you this. What would you have done in Simone's position? If someone powerful tried to erase you, if they left you with nothing, if they thought you'd just disappear, would you have found the strength to fight back? Would you have survived? This story is about more than one woman's survival. It's about the thousands of women who've been in similar situations. Who've been abandoned, silenced. Who've been told their stories don't matter, that they're too weak to fight back, that they should just accept what happened and move on. But Simone proved something important. She proved that you don't have to accept injustice. That you don't have to carry shame that isn't yours. That you don't have to let someone else's cruelty define your life. Simone didn't win because she was rich or connected or powerful. She won because she refused to give up. Because she believed her life mattered. Because she had faith that even in her darkest moments, God was still there. There's a verse that Simone keeps on her desk. "I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." That promise kept her breathing when she wanted to quit. That promise carried her through nights when she didn't think she'd survive. That promise brought her to where she is today. Zara is 16 now. She wants to be a lawyer, wants to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. She volunteers at Bloom, helps run social media campaigns, speaks at youth events. She carries her mother's strength and her own unique power. And when people ask her how she handles knowing her story, knowing where she came from, she says, "My story isn't about him. It's about her. My mom is the hero. And I'm going to make her proud." If you want to know more about Simone and Zara, comment, "What about Victoria?" and turn on notifications so you'll not miss part 2. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that you're stronger than you think, if it gave you hope that justice is possible even when it feels impossible, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me what part of this story hit you hardest. Tell me if you've ever had to fight for your truth. Tell me if you're still fighting. Because you're not alone. There are thousands of us who fought back, who've refused to stay silent. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click that button right now. We've got more stories coming. Remember this. The people who throw you away don't get to write your ending. You do. So pick up that pen. Write something beautiful. Write something true. Write something that proves you were never trash. You were always treasure. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.